100%. I've absolutely seen that in practice, just in terms of facilitating, even just like, small SME businesses or diverse businesses or whatever it is, facilitating that into the supply chain. You get those aggregated benefits, particularly around things like government contracts.
Right.
It's a real clever way to do it, and they say it's kind of doing for the good of humanity to a certain extent, but it's also taking the log jam away that
Yeah.
for the end customer is a major disadvantage for them, because if they can't engage those sometimes those smaller or those different thinking businesses, they just don't
Right.
have that agility. They lose out on that innovation.
Yeah, some people call that impact sourcing. And so, it's I give you an example. So there's a company that I worked with. It's a veteran and minority owned business. And what they did is they had combat veterans from, this is way back in the day. This is mostly from the first Gulf War, folks who were mobility impaired and lost a leg or whatever it was, right? But they're smart people. They were hardworking people. They wanted to have meaningful work, but they couldn't commute very well, right? And so this company hired a bunch of these folks, and originally what they did was call center kind of work. And you've got folks who are distributed across the country and whatever, where they happen to live, but they're connected with the network and processes and tools of this company. And it's one of those things. This is like way pre-pandemic, and remote work wasn't kind of normal, right? But because I was working in aerospace and defense, and there were certain requirements around secure location for doing portions of the work and ITIR and a bunch of stuff like that. I couldn't use that supplier, but I introduced them to one of the other suppliers in my supplier ecosystem and said, "Hey, these guys got a great model. It's giving jobs and dignity and meaning to these combat veterans who done great things for the country, and maybe you guys can work together." And a couple of the different suppliers that I had were like, yeah, we could use them for a part of our, not for you guys, but for other customers. And again, it happened to do with the way the restrictions were around where work could be performed, because some of this work was like classified, and like you can't do that in somebody's living room, but or proprietary, or uh, critical technical information or things like that, which you just can't, you have to protect in certain ways. But other companies that didn't do that sort of stuff, or that didn't have the need for that kind of stuff, and you could be more flexible, they were able to do it. So, there's a lot of creative problem solving that can go with that as well, if you have a good relationship with your supplier ecosystem. Plus, they can also bring to you like, hey, you guys are doing this thing, and like the world's moved on. We don't do it that way anymore for most of our other clients. Maybe you should consider, a change that's actually going to be beneficial for you, right? And going back to that whole, technology changing so quickly nowadays, and well, business models change. There's a lot of things that change, right? And so, the ability to have those really long-term contracts, which, again, to be clear, was multiple short contracts but renewals, um, and earn the work. Well, one of the ways people do that is let's say you've got like a 2-year deal that automatically renews if certain SLAs or whatever are met, or certain targets are met, and it could be continuously renewing. So you keep doing a great job, you keep earning more work or whatever, right? There's creative ways to do that. But part of what happens that allows those things to keep going long term is the supplier isn't just doing what you're telling them to do. They're saying, hey, I've got this idea. Let's talk. And so it's dynamic, it's not static. And that's again where if you're buying effort, you're hiring people directly, you're hiring contractors, whatever it is, you're not going to get that dynamic problem solving. You're just going to get, I'm going to do whatever you tell me to do.
And that's the value of great procurement, really, isn't it? And I think it leads me on to another point that'd be interesting to discuss, which is just that kind of the evolution of the procurement function, the differences that exist within different organizations in terms of how their procurement function is set up, and just that kind of lack of standardization. I mean, as a procure tech provider, as we are, we're providing technology into procurement teams to help them solve problems for their end customers within their
Mm.
organizations, for us specifically around buying services. But when I go to, for example, Digital Procurement World, DPW, the event, I think it's in New York as well now, but was previously always
Yeah.
in Amsterdam. Um,
Hmm.
if you talk to any of the vendors there, they'll tell you it's really difficult to sell into procurement, because partly because of the lack of standardization. And it's not, even if if someone's got a really suitable offering, it's very difficult for them to be able to target the people that probably is relevant to, because procurement teams are so wildly different, even in similar looking organizations. It's not like the marketing
Yeah.
function where, like the marketing technology is very sector is very mature. It's very large, but marketing functions are relatively standardized across organizations. When you were talking at the beginning of our conversation about the work you were doing that ended up with you basically forming that sourcing department,
Mm.
that sounded like almost like you were really the beginning of any sophisticated procurement in that organization. And in
Well, they
reality,
had purchasing prior to that.
so
Um,
purchasing is more the kind of like the operational getting it done, isn't it? Whereas
Correct.
procurement is the
Right.
strategic side.
Right.
But
Yeah, they did not have strategic sourcing. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
so
Um,
but that's not that long ago.
well, that was a while ago.
But
Um,
even if it's
but
20, even if it's 20 years ago,
yeah,
25 years ago, something like that. What I'm
right.
kind of driving at is that I still think there's a ways to go for procurement as a function to really
Agree.
kind
Yeah,
of
I agree. Yeah.
evolve to the level that some other functions are. And I think that's
Right.
not a bad thing. That's a really exciting thing.
Well, it is, but I think there's a couple of foundational challenges, right? So procurement typically doesn't have money for, um, technology, right? It's kind of like the cobbler's kids have no shoes sort of thing. So a really strategic procurement department will do things like, um, they will take some of the cost savings they generate and repurpose it back to being able to invest in what's needed to move up the value chain, right? Because you can only go so far with people and process, and then you have to start adding on tools and data, or you just can't do it. So, for example, in my team last year, I implemented a contract lifecycle management system. If you look at most capability maturity models, um, if it's a five-stage model to get past stage three, if it's a four-stage model to get past stage two, you have to have a CLM system. Most Fortune 500 companies, well, yeah, I would say less than half of the Fortune 500 companies actually have one that's efficiently being utilized. I mean, like, to institutionalize contract playbooks and things like that, right? So it's not that folks don't have them or that it's not a capability, but not everybody does. And that's something that's just foundational to being to really moving up the value chain and doing the best you can as a strategic procurement team for your enterprise. And that's just one of many tools, right? My point is that it's hard to get the tools, and the people who do it strategically. Like the business case I built when I went to the CFO was, the response was, well, there's no such thing as a no-brainer business case, but this is about as close as I've seen, right? And so I was able to get a bunch of money from other people because we didn't add money to the organization. We just took it from other priorities and gave it to me. So, if you're strategic, if you can, talk like a business person, if you can, really sell internally, you can get those investments. So in a lot of ways, it's not even the structure of the team or what their charter is. It's who's leading it and do they have efficient, effective relationships with the people that have the money, right? Because your budget in IT is always going to have budget to go play with and test new technologies and buy more stuff, right? At least in most companies. Your budget in procurement is going to be to run and maintain, right? It's usually not to grow unless you do a business case and get specific additional, I'll call it non-recurring funds, right? To make those investments.